A lot of you guys are asking me about textual traditions. I did a podcast on this topic a while ago, and I also we republish Theodore Letis's book, the Ecclesiastical Text, and I agree with Letis's view. Which, if you want to know, what all of this debate is really about, it's in terms of the textual tradition. So you've got many textual traditions, but broadly speaking, there are kind of three categories, let's say. Okay. Then this is super rough, and this is such a complex issue. Okay. But you've got kind of the critical text, okay, which is what most New Testament texts today, most translations are based on, there are a lot of rules behind what the best text is. But what you have is a constantly changing text. And the focus with B.B. Warfield, who I just mentioned, and Warfield was defending the inerrancy of Scripture very well in many ways. But what happens in Warfield in his fight with modernism is there's a shift in emphasis to where what people are talking about when talking about the inerrancy of Scripture becomes the original autographs, meaning the text that the apostles themselves wrote. So if what is inerrant is the original autographs, we have the natural question, which is, well, how do we know what's in our Bible today is what the apostles originally wrote? Because we have no autographs. We don't have anything even close to the autographs. We don't have hardly any text. This isn't just Scripture, because what people write on wears out, and it wears out over 2,000 years, and people are passing these books along and saying we shouldn't expect to have original autographs. Okay, they're not. Churches didn't receive the Gospel of Matthew and put it in a golden box somewhere to be preserved. That just didn't happen. So then what develops is a method of viewing the text, which says, how is it that we can determine what the earliest text is? And there are a lot of rules around that. Largely kind of the shortest text is usually better. That's one of the general principles. And there are all sorts of things. So what you have is a text that's constantly shifting. So even like the ESV, for example, has just shifted. There have been many editions of the ESV already. And that does involve translation as well. It's not just textual issues. That's not the perspective. That's not the text that I prefer to use. What I use for my main Bible is the New King James. This is a New King James right here. And I do use other Bibles as well. I use the RSV. Specifically, I use the Second Catholic Edition RSV, which I think is really good. I think it's better than the ESV because it's liturgically sensitive in ways that the ESV is not. And it has the Apocrypha, which is just a good thing to have. But I guess there's a Catholic version of the ESV now, which has the Apocrypha. I just don't know what the point of it is, because you've already got the Second Catholic Edition RSV, and it's just as good, if not, I think, better. So I don't know. Crossway, I don't know. They're really good at their marketing. I mean, it's incredible. They're getting Roman Catholics to read their version of the Bible now. I have not checked out the EHV yet. And this is a newer translation, I believe, from the Wisconsin Synod. The ESV Apocrypha is an Anglican thing. Interesting. Okay. I didn't know that. I had heard it was Roman Catholic, but yeah, the EHV, I have not looked at it yet. I really want to, and I will. I haven't yet. So I would love to give you my thoughts when I do get a hold of it and get a chance to read it. So I use different translations. I do use the ESV some, but New King James and Classic King James are my two favorites. Okay, so those are the ones that I go to the most. And the reason is it's an issue of, it's really an issue of what text is inspired. Is it the original autographs, which we don't have, or is it the text that has been preserved in the church? And I have the opinion that it is the apocrypha, not the autographa, or the text as it has been preserved in the church, that God has both inspired his word and preserved his word in the church. Now, I will tell you this, okay? Because if you talk to a King James onlyist or one of these fundy Baptist types, they're going to use the King James like I do, but they hate the New King James. And there's also the modern English version, which I do use some as well. My Greek professor in college did the Matthew translation, which I think is excellent, but probably because he taught me Greek. So I read Greek like he did. But the MEV is pretty good too. For the most part, the translation of 1 Peter 3 is really bad, but the most of it I do like. But it's a question of like God's preservation of his word. And I think the one text that illustrates this better than any other is Mark 16. Okay. The ending of Mark, the long ending of Mark. Is it the case that the long ending of Mark that most of the churches had, and you could find it in church fathers very early, is it the case that the majority of the church has had a version of Mark that is wrong, that is not inspired? And I struggle with that idea, especially when it's said that the ending of Mark was just lost. Now, there are different perspectives. Some say you didn't mean to include the resurrection at the end, which it does not make any sense to me. But so that's really, I think, a key place where you see practically how it works out. With that being said, the issue is really complicated, because even when you're talking about the question of, well, what's the text preserved in the church? Because there are variances even in what's been preserved in the church. I mean, that's true. Like, the question of the text that we're using is a complex question, no matter what position you take. Okay. And what I don't think you can do is just to stop at some point in history and say, like, this text is the perfect one. In that, because this is what Rome did with the Latin Vulgate, right? Now, I don't see a reason not to use the Textus Receptus. It seems like the best that we've got. There is the issue of the Comma Johanneum, that one text in 1 John that is really not well attested in like any early source. So I don't know about that. And it is attested early-ish, but sometimes in different places and even in different gospels. Or sorry, I'm confusing that with the woman caught in adultery. Yeah, James White may come after me now because I'm dealing with textual issues. Maybe. Yeah, he's pretty vicious when it comes to that stuff too, at least what I've heard. He did with the blog post I had about this some time ago. Anyway, this is not my area of expertise, okay? My position is Letus's ecclesiastical text position. I don't have, this isn't a fight that I want to like get deeply into. Most of my friends who are pastors don't hold the position I have. Okay. They just don't. I don't think they're heretics. I'm not condemning them. I'm not saying they should be banned from the Lutheran Church and under, excommunication because they have a different view of which New Testament text we should use. I mean, like, so I'm not like, this isn't an issue I want to really like debate about, particularly not my area of expertise. But because you're asking, yes, I do hold to the ecclesiastical text position. So I generally tend toward, I like translations that use either the Textus Receptus or the majority text, rather than readings which are not very well attested in the history of the church, as you find in the critical text.